Good Shabbos, everyone. You probably heard of Black History Month, which is commemorated in February, or Hispanic Heritage Month, which is marked in September, or Women's History Month in March. But if I had to bet, I would guess that very few of you know that this month, the month of May, is Jewish American Heritage Month. That's right. This month-long celebration was officially recognized in 2006, when President George W. Bush issued a formal proclamation honoring America's Jews. May is now the month for recognizing the endearing contributions and innovations our people have made to American culture, American education, science, and technology. Now, what have we Jews contributed to America? Just as Americans of other ethnic and religious groups have laid the foundation for our great country, we Jews have also contributed our share, from before the Revolutionary War until this day. For example, polio is no longer a threat to American children because of the contributions of Jewish doctors like Jonas Salk. We only make up less than 2% of the United States population, yet in the scientific research fields of chemistry, economics, physics, and medicines, American Nobel Prize winners, the percentage that have been Jewish is 38%. There have been great entertainers and comedians like the legendary escape artist Harry Houdini, Superman creators Jerry Spiegel and Joe Shuster, singers like Barbra Streisand and Bob Dylan, and of course, composer Irving Berlin, who wrote God Bless America and the classic White Christmas. Yes, there are many, many famous Jews who have become household names. Too many examples to list here. But many everyday Jews have also contributed to American success. There are Jewish teachers and construction workers who contributed to educating future generations of Americans and built the nation's first skyscrapers. United States Jews served proudly in our military since the time of the Revolutionary War. And Jews marched arm in arm with American and African American leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and gave their lives in support of the 1960s civil rights movement. Yes, we Jews are one of the many ethnic groups that have helped build this great country, pursuing and protecting the American dream. And I'm glad that since 2006, we too have been celebrated with our own month. I think we can be very proud of our accomplishments to America. But sometimes, my friends, I think we forget one area that we've also contributed to American society: religion. And thus it's fitting that 2 weeks ago, as the calendar turned from April to May, we lost one of the greatest American rabbis of all time, Rabbi Harold Kushner. You may have heard of that name before. Rabbi Kushner was a conservative rabbi in the Boston area for over 50 years. He was an extraordinary pulpit rabbi, but he became world famous back in 1981 because of his New York Times bestseller, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. The book has been translated into 12 languages and has sold more than 4 million copies. In many respects, it's become the best-selling Jewish book of all time, outside of the possible exception of the Bible. The impact of his book is truly immeasurable. Ask most pulpit rabbis, and ask many Christian ministers, and they'll tell you that his book is among the books they recommend to people when they are grieving. I often give out his book. I have a whole shelf full in my office because his book has helped so many. It's a book and a source, a simple, humanistic, God-centered wisdom that not only speaks to Jews but to people of all faiths. His gentle wisdom has helped millions of fellow Americans. Now, why did Rabbi Kushner write this legendary book? When Bad Things Happen to Good People emerged out of the early and tragic loss of his young son, Aaron. And that tragedy prompted Rabbi Kushner to question, what does it mean to have faith in God in the face of great suffering? To simplify, in his book, Rabbi Kushner points out that we can make three statements about the world. Number one, there is suffering and evil in the world. Number two, God is all-powerful. And number three, God is good. But we can only keep two of those statements in order to have a coherent worldview. Which two can we keep? Most of us won't deny that there is suffering and evil in the world. So that statement must stay. But what about the next two? If God is all-powerful and allows suffering and evil to flourish, then God must not be good. And therefore not a good any sane person would worship. And likewise, Rabbi Kushner rejects the traditional idea that suffering is punishment for sin. And therefore, if the choice is between a good God and an all-powerful God, Kushner keeps the good God and discards the idea of an all-powerful God. But if so, what happened to God's all-powerful nature? Kushner explains that God voluntarily chose to limit divine power in two distinct arenas. Number one, human evil exists because God gave free will to us, to human beings. And that's why we have genocides and mass shootings. God's not doing these things. Evil human beings with free will are. And number two, there is natural evil like illness and natural disasters. And they exist because God created a world with immutable natural laws, which don't make exceptions for nice people. Years ago, Rabbi Kushner once said to me here on a trip to Houston to speak at our 100 Jewish men's group, he said, Brian, expecting the world to treat you fairly because you're a good person is like expecting a bull not to charge you when you're waving a red cape, but you're a vegetarian. From a purely moral standpoint, the bull should know better. You're a vegetarian. But of course the bull doesn't know better. No matter how good we are, our rule is not often based on fairness. In his book, gave millions who were suffering the comfort they needed. God was not punishing them for something they may have done. They didn't have to suffer twice. Rather, God was suffering with them because human evil and natural disasters exist in a world of free will. And God was there for millions who had experienced unspeakable tragedies, thanks to his book. And Rabbi Kushner was sharing with the world the Jewish concept of olam keminhago noheg. God allows the world to proceed along its natural course. It's not always fair, but that's how the world often works. For example, almost 2,000 years ago, the rabbis of the Talmud asked, suppose a man stole a bag of seeds and planted them in his garden. It'd be right if the seeds didn't grow. They're stolen seeds. But nature follows its own rules and is indifferent to what is right and wrong. The seeds will germinate. The seeds will grow, even if they're stolen. Because God, as Rabbi Kushner reminded so many, created our world and then set it into motion. No matter how careful we are, no matter how hard we try not to make mistakes, sometimes things simply go wrong, even if we're undeserving. Kushner's wisdom and the wisdom of taking the best of our Jewish tradition allowed countless numbers of Jews and non-Jews to maintain their relationship with God, to still feel God's love, and to persevere through life, that God was still on their side. The book in many ways made Rabbi Kushner not just America's rabbi, but in many ways, America's healer. When millions of Jews and millions of non-Jewish Americans have looked for strength, they look to a rabbi full of Jewish understanding and insights. And Rabbi Kushner reminded millions that the Jewish belief system could help anyone in need. My friends, this month, as we celebrate our accomplishments as American Jews, let us not forget rabbis like Harold Kushner and books like when bad things happen to good people. We do have a lot to say to help our fellow Americans. Even in these challenging times, like Rabbi Kushner, can we have the knowledge and the courage to do so? Our children are growing up in a world in which, thank God, most Americans still respect us. They want to learn from us. Yes, there are pockets in this country where anti-Semitism is on the rise, but I still argue that there are many more pockets of Americans who are looking for wisdom and are looking for wisdom from a great faith like our Jewish tradition. But the challenge is for you and me and for our children. Do we know enough about our Jewish tradition? Have we read books like When Bad Things Happen to Good People? Do we understand how our Jewish belief system works? Do we understand the wise tradition of our theology? Because we have to understand and be able to understand it ourselves in order to share the timeless lessons and values with so many non-Jewish Americans who are also struggling with their faiths or looking to make sense of a more complicated world. They need our advice, the advice of our tradition, because there is so much wisdom in what we represent as Jews. And our non-Jewish neighbors who may not belong to a place of worship, they are yearning for spiritual guidance. Can we be there for them? Yes, in so many ways, we can be very proud of what we contributed to American culture and society. Let's continue to share the stories with our young. Do they know the great stories of what American Jews have done, how we've fought in all of the wars, how we contributed in so many aspects of American society? And yes, we've also contributed to religion in this country. Let us not forget that thanks to fellow American Jews like Harold Kushner, we have helped bring comfort and healing to so many of our fellow Americans. Let us continue to do so in the years and decades ahead, and God willing, may future generations of young American Jews continue to make this country great. Shabbat Shalom.